Kevin Stefanski may be the head coach, but Tommy Rees didn't shy away from highlighting the gaps that have left Shedeur Sanders with barely any room to grow. Rees contrasted the team's wealth of raw talent with the chaos, eroding every attempt to build momentum on offense. He spoke openly about the lack of chemistry across the offensive line.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
The breakdowns in timing and internal debates that distract from teaching actual football fundamentals. The dysfunction isn't abstract. It shows up in every missed block, every blown assignment, and every misread route, turning the offense into something resembling a haunted script the players can't decipher. Sanders, in this state, becomes collateral damage rather than part of a coherent plan. What Rees made clear is that Sanders deserves an environment rooted in structure, not turbulence. Development isn't just about reps. It's about putting a young quarterback into situations where he can learn without being overwhelmed by systemic errors around him. Until Cleveland regains discipline and direction, Rees sees restraint, not urgency, as the only responsible way to guide Sanders forward. Tommy Rees didn't dance around anything. He didn't deflect, didn't tiptoe, didn't hand out the usual copy-paste lines we've all come to expect in mid-season pressers. No, he looked directly at the question and told the truth. The kind of truth that doesn't just ripple, it detonates. Yes, Shedeur Sanders isn't playing. Yes, fans are frustrated. And yes, there's a reason. But it's not what the public thought. It's not a lack of talent. It's not poor performance in practice. And it's certainly not because the coaches haven't noticed the quarterback room is hanging on by a thread. The reason, according to Rees, is much deeper and far more concerning. He pulled the curtain back on the real issues. Internal politics, poor decision-making, a lack of cohesion that goes beyond X's and O's. And just like that, the conversation shifted from why isn't Sanders starting to what is actually going on inside this team. It's one thing to have growing pains in an offense, but Rees made it clear this isn't about growing pains. It's about structural dysfunction. He openly criticized the offensive identity or lack thereof. He said it's like trying to teach a cat to swim. The visual might be amusing, but the point is serious. This team doesn't have rhythm, it doesn't have flow, and right now, it doesn't have a plan that functions. And in a room full of high-level receivers, running backs, and tight ends, that kind of disorganization is glaring. How do you have that much talent and still produce so little? The answer isn't just bad play calling. It's that there's no alignment, no direction, and no consistency. Rees pointed to the instability in the offensive line, the lack of timing between positions, and a playbook that's being used like it's cursed. He didn't just suggest the offense was underperforming. He said it was broken. And in that kind of environment, no quarterback, no matter how gifted, is going to thrive. And this is where Shedeur Sanders comes into the spotlight. Not because he did something wrong. Not because he isn't ready. But because the system around him is too unstable to set him up for success. Rees was honest about that, too. He said Shedeur's development is a priority, but not at the cost of throwing him into a chaotic situation that could stunt that development before it even begins. That might sound like coach speak at first glance, but coming from Rees, in the context of everything else he said, it felt different. It felt like a guy trying to preserve something he knows could be great, instead of using it as a temporary patch. And that's where this starts to sting for fans. Because on one hand, they've been begging to see Shedeur play, especially with other quarterbacks injured, the offense sputtering and momentum slipping away. But on the other hand, Rees is telling them what no one else in the organization has been willing to say. This isn't about Sanders. It's about everything else falling apart around him. The offense doesn't have a quarterback problem. It has a system problem. And Shedeur stepping onto the field won't magically solve that. In fact, it might make things worse. Not for the team, but for him. Rees drew a line there. He said this is about fundamentals, about rebuilding discipline, about doing it the right way, brick by brick, no matter how impatient the crowd gets. And for a franchise that spent years chasing quick fixes and highlight moments, that's a rare and uncomfortable stance, because it doesn't promise anything fast. It doesn't offer an easy answer. but it's rooted in the kind of long-term thinking that Cleveland hasn't seen in years. Rees also didn't hold back when it came to how quarterback decisions are being handled. He didn't name Stefanski directly, but the implication was there. Rees strongly hinted that some of these choices, especially around reps and rotations, aren't strictly about football, that there's a layer of internal politics impacting the depth chart. And if true, that's a huge problem. Not only does it confuse the locker room, it undercuts the credibility of the process. How do you ask players to trust the system when the system clearly isn't putting talent in the best position to succeed? That's exactly what Rees was calling out. He's not just talking about an ineffective offense. He's talking about a broken chain of command. He's pointing to decisions being made for reasons other than performance or development. And in the NFL, that kind of dysfunction doesn't just stall progress. It kills it, which is why Rees is holding firm. He refuses to cave to pressure. He refuses to rush Sanders on the field before the offense is ready to protect him, support him, and give him a legitimate chance to grow. Because once you throw a young quarterback into a storm, there's no undoing the damage. This isn't just about Shedeur getting reps. It's about giving him the right reps at the right time with the right support. SS practicing, and yeah, that requires patience. Something fans are understandably tired of. But this time, there's a difference. This time, someone inside the building is actually explaining what's happening. Rees didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't hide behind, he's still learning. He told the truth. The system is unstable. The culture needs to shift, and throwing a rookie into chaos isn't leadership. It's negligence. Now, that level of transparency is unusual and controversial, but it also signals a shift. Rees isn't just trying to fix the offense. He's trying to rebuild the Browns' identity from the inside out. This is no longer about short-term schemes or who's calling plays on Sunday. This is about structure, about discipline, about refusing to let hype dictate decision-making, and about creating something that actually lasts. And if that means Shedeur has to wait, then he waits. Not because he's being benched, but because when his moment does come, Rees wants him stepping into a system that's finally ready to support him. Not just survive, but succeed. There's still a long road ahead, and Rees knows that. The critics are already circling. Every game the Browns lose, every rep Sanders doesn't get, the noise will grow louder. But Rees has drawn a line in the sand, and he's betting that structure and patience will outlast the chaos. Because he's seen what happens when you rush it. He's seen what happens when you feed a young quarterback to the wolves because you're out of ideas. He's not going to be the next coach to do that. Not with Shedeur. Not again. So where does that leave the Browns? At a crossroads. Either they start making hard changes to stabilize the offense, or they risk wasting not just a season, but a quarterback with real potential. And Rees? He's not waiting for permission. He's already leading the charge. Let us know what you think. Was Rees right to pull back the curtain on Cleveland's internal dysfunction, or is this just another chapter in a saga that refuses to end? Like, if you're here for coaches who keep it real, drop a comment with your take on Shedeur's future, and hit subscribe to keep up with every twist in this ongoing Browns drama, because whether you're rooting for patience or pushing for change, one thing's clear. This story isn't close to finished. The moment Tommy Rees opened his mouth, the Browns stopped being just another underperforming offense and became a case study in how dysfunction hides in plain sight until someone finally calls it out. And call it out? He did. This wasn't a nervous assistant coach doing damage control. This was Cleveland's offensive coordinator pulling the fire alarm mid-season in public. And when the smoke cleared, all eyes were on one name, Shedeur Sanders. Now, let's not lose sight of this. Rees didn't have to say any of it. He could have played the game. He could have hidden behind coach speak, tossed out a few vague lines about evaluation, development, or playing the best guy for the system. But he didn't. He told the truth. And when he did, the narrative flipped. Suddenly, this wasn't a mystery about why Sanders wasn't playing. It was a revelation about what's really happening behind the scenes in Cleveland. A system held together by hope, slipping playbooks, and what Rees bluntly described as team politics. Those two words, team politics, hit like a brick through a window. That's not your average coaching critique. That's a direct shot at the decision-making process, at how reps are handed out, at who gets the green light, and who's stuck watching from the sideline. No matter how many quarterbacks ahead of them are hurt or ineffective, Rees didn't just say the offense needs work. He said the whole operation is disjointed. There's a lack of cohesion. There's a leadership vacuum. And worst of all, the system is actively making it harder for talented players like Shedeur Sanders to see the field. That's the real scandal here. Because Rees never once questioned Sanders' talent. In fact, the opposite. His remarks implied that Sanders should be seeing more action, that he's clearly one of the more capable quarterbacks on the roster. But the structure around him, both in terms of play design and organizational support, is so chaotic that putting him out there now could do more harm than good. And that right there, that's the pivot. This isn't about Sanders being not ready. It's about the Browns being not ready for him. Rees compared trying to create offensive rhythm in Cleveland to teaching a cat to swim. That's how far gone the current system is. It's not just ineffective, it's counterproductive. You're not just failing to execute, you're actively regressing. And if you throw a young quarterback into that, you're not coaching, you're gambling. Rees refuses to gamble. SS practicing, instead, he's gone all in on fundamentals, on blocking, on timing, on execution. The boring stuff, the invisible stuff, the stuff no one celebrates on Sunday, but that actually wins games. He wants to rebuild the offense from the ground up, slowly, deliberately, without skipping steps or chasing hype. And that means no rushing Sanders into a haunted playbook and calling it experience. Now, in fairness, that's not what fans want to hear. They've been waiting all season. They watched this offense sputter week after week, while the most intriguing quarterback on the roster stands on the sideline. They've sat through injury reports, stale schemes, and drive after drive of unforced errors, and they're done waiting. But Rees is standing firm. And that's exactly what makes this moment so rare. In a league obsessed with fast results, he's preaching patience. In a franchise haunted by inconsistency, he's demanding discipline. In a quarterback room torn apart by politics and indecision, he's protecting the one guy who might actually offer a future. Because if Sanders goes out there now, behind a leaky line in a broken system, under a fractured coaching hierarchy, he won't just be fighting the opposing defense. He'll be fighting his own offense. That's not development. That's sabotage. And Rees knows the history. He knows how many quarterbacks have been fed into bad systems and never came out the other side. Talented players, buried under the weight of mismanaged schemes, toxic cultures, and bad timing. He's not going to let that happen again. Not with Sanders. That's why he spoke out. Not just explain a depth chart, but to issue a warning. This team isn't ready. Not for him. Not yet. And until they are, Rees isn't moving. Not for fan pressure. Not for media scrutiny. Not even for locker room politics. That's leadership. But it's also a gamble. Because in the NFL, patience isn't just rare, it's expensive. Every week Sanders doesn't play. Every press conference Rees has to defend that choice. The pressure builds. The stakes get higher. The noise gets louder. And in a franchise as restless as Cleveland, the window for rebuilding is always smaller than it looks. Rees is betting that if he holds the line now, Sanders will have the right foundation later, that he'll walk into a system that protects him, supports him, and actually allows him to shine. Not flash for a few weeks. Shine. That kind of long-term thinking is hard to sell when you're losing, but it's exactly what this franchise needs. Because let's be honest, the Browns have tried the quick fixes. They've rotated quarterbacks, rebranded coordinators, chased headlines. It hasn't worked. Rees is offering something different. Structure, consistency, an actual plan. And yes, that means waiting. But it also means stopping the cycle of hype over substance that's held this team hostage for years. It means acknowledging that no matter how talented Sanders is, and he is, throwing him into chaos doesn't prove anything except how dysfunctional things still are. So what now? Rees has said his piece. The excuses are gone. The spotlight is on. If the Browns continue to spiral, it won't be because they lack talent. It'll be because they lack the guts to fix their own system before demanding results from their players. The team has to choose. Keep pretending the offense is coming together, or face the hard truth and build it right, not for optics, for the long haul, because Rees isn't backing down. And eventually, Shedeur Sanders will get his chance, but only when it's earned, not by him, but by the team around him. Until then, the Browns have work to do. SS practicing, the Browns have been here before. A new season, a new name, a new spark of hope flickering under the same cloud of confusion. But this time felt different, until it didn't. And now, thanks to Tommy Rees, the illusion is gone. The cards on the table, the curtains wide open, and what's been exposed isn't just one quarterback controversy. It's a full-blown identity crisis. The Cleveland Browns aren't failing because they lack talent. That was never the issue. They're failing because they still haven't figured out how to function like a real team. And that's not a fan theory. That's straight from the offensive coordinator's mouth. In one interview, Rees took everything Cleveland has been dodging all season and dragged it into the light. Team politics, lack of direction, chaotic play calling. These aren't just phrases, they're alarms. And behind all of it, sitting quietly on the sideline, is Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback who is supposed to bring something new, something promising, something next. Instead, he's been buried under a system that Rees described as fundamentally broken. So what do you do when the guy who's supposed to fix the offense tells you the real problem isn't the players? It's the decisions being made, above and around them? You pay attention, because that's not something coordinators say unless they've reached a breaking point. And clearly, Rees has. Let's be real. In the NFL, the offensive coordinator isn't supposed to say these things out loud. Not mid-season. Not while the team is still technically in the race. It's supposed to be we're close, we're working through it, we trust our guys. But Rees cut through the nonsense and told the truth. This offense has no rhythm, no identity, and no business throwing Shedeur Sanders into the mix just to quiet the noise. Not when the offensive line can't hold protection. Not when the route trees aren't consistent. Not when the playbook feels like it was written by a ghostwriter with commitment issues. Rees isn't trying to protect himself. He's trying to protect Sanders from the same fate that's claimed too many young quarterbacks in this league. Being tossed into a disorganized mess and blamed when it all falls apart. That's why the development plan is deliberate. That's why Sanders is being kept on ice. Because Rees doesn't want him out there trying to improvise his way through a haunted offense. He wants him stepping into something that makes sense. Something functional. Something that doesn't require miracles to move the chains. And let's not forget, this isn't about benching a rookie until he gets it. Rees made it clear. Sanders is good. His talent is not in question. What is in question is whether the system around him is capable of letting that talent show. Right now, the answer is no. Which brings us back to the real issue. This team's problems go way beyond quarterback. The dysfunction isn't just visible in the stats or the losses. It's baked into the decision-making, into the inconsistent identity, into the refusal to commit to structure over spectacle. Rees calling out team politics wasn't a throwaway line. It was a statement about who's really making calls. And what's scary is how many people inside the building probably know he's right, but aren't willing to say it. That's the cost of transparency. Rees just became the most honest voice in a franchise that desperately needed one. Now the pressure's on, and it's not on Sanders. It's on the Browns to clean up the mess before they waste another chance at building something real. Because that's exactly what Rees is trying to do here. Stop the cycle. The one where talent walks into dysfunction, gets buried under bad leadership, and exits with their potential wasted. He's trying to build the offense from the ground up, even if that means sacrificing short-term excitement for long-term stability. Even if that means being the villain for holding Shedeur back. Even if that means taking heat for decisions he didn't even fully control. That's where the subtext comes in. Rees didn't name Kevin Stefanski, but the tension was clear. The quarterback rotation, the inconsistent reps, the hesitation around giving Sanders a shot, all of it was on the table. Rees hinted, with just enough edge, that these decisions weren't always football-driven. And honestly, that might be the most damning part of all. Because if talent isn't the problem, if health isn't the problem, and if readiness isn't the problem, Then what is? That's the question Rees quietly planted in everyone's mind. And the longer Sanders stays sidelined while the offense continues to collapse under its own weight, the louder that question becomes. SS practicing, this could have stayed behind closed doors. But it didn't. Rees cracked it wide open. And now, this isn't just about whether Sanders will play. It's about what's holding the Browns back from letting him. The message was loud. This team needs to get its house in order before it hands Shedeur the keys. And if it does, then maybe, finally, Cleveland can stop being a team of potential and start being the team that delivers. But if it doesn't, if the dysfunction keeps spreading, if the culture refuses to change, then it won't matter how talented Sanders is. He'll be the next in a long line of wasted opportunities. That's the reality Rees was warning about. That's why he said what he said. Not to stir the pot, to stop the spiral. So where does this all lead? For now, Rees is standing his ground. He's not giving in to pressure. He's not rushing the process. And he's not pretending things are fine when they clearly aren't. It's uncomfortable, it's unpopular, but it's necessary. And Sanders? He waits. Not because he isn't ready, but because Rees is determined to make sure that when he does step in, he's walking into something built to last, not just built to survive the week. That's the goal. That's the standard. Now it's on the rest of the organization to match it. What do you think? Is Rees doing the right thing by holding the line, or is Cleveland squandering a chance to turn things around? Like the video, if you appreciate coaches who speak the truth, hit subscribe to keep following the drama in real time, and drop your thoughts in the comments, because in Cleveland, the silence around Shedeur Sanders just got a lot harder to ignore.